Now, when it is Tuesday and it is 9 p.m., you know the drill. It is always State of the Nation here on KUTV. And tonight we are looking at the National Dialogue Committee. The recommendations are out after almost 90 days of sittings between the 14-member committee and several professionals. Finally, there are some things that have been agreed on, and there are some things that have not been agreed on and escalated to the leadership of both coalitions. But a section of Kenyans feel that what they presented or what they wanted captured has not appeared in the final report. Do we have time? Where do we go next from here? Will the MPs debate this and manage to even pass small amendments to what has been presented by Kalonzo Musyoka and Kimani Ichung'wah-led committee? We discussed that tonight, and my guests are already in studio, seated, ready to help me discuss this and see the possibilities and what's not so possible with this report. I'm having in studio Grace Kamau, who is the sub-county coordinator, that is the National Government Affirmative Action Fund in Nairobi. She'll be speaking later on and even introducing herself better. She tells me she's an active citizen. And of course, we also have Kimani, who is the Kiambu Youth Council Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me this evening. I want you to introduce yourself. I think you'll do even a better job, especially on that part of you being an active citizen.
Hello, my name is Grace Kamau. I am a human rights defender, a champion of GBV. I also focus on mental health and governance. And apart from that, I'm an active citizen. I was an aspirant during the 2022 elections, MCA Kahawa Ward, but I never got to the ballot because of consensus, this whole Azimio coalition thing. And I was also monitoring the elections in Resambo, and there were some few hitches here and there, and I ended up being a petitioner at the Supreme Court for the presidential elections. So yeah, you're right, I am quite an active citizen.
Kimani Wachira.
Thank you for hosting me.
Yeah.
I'm Kimani wa Wachira, the immediate former president, Debate Student Association, and the current chair and founder, Kiambu Youth Council, where we advocate, advance, and educate our youths from Kiambu County. I'm also a national youth leader, and I'm here to deliberate and discuss the state of the nation. I have seen that my colleague is quite an active colleague, and I'm also active in the political sceneries. Yep. And thank you for hosting us.
Thank you so much for joining me tonight. 90 days is such a long time, and we have been having talks. Of course, they were financed. We expected recommendations finally. Kenyans have been waiting to see. It was styled as what was going to bring Kenyans together. Of course, after a divisive election that pit Raila against William Ruto, do you think, let me start with the lady, because we are two gentlemen on the panel. I believe you agree with me. Let's start with the lady. Do you think that the recommendations are what Kenyans were waiting for?
That is not what Kenyans anticipated. And for the 3 months when this committee was created, Kenyans had their own issues that they wish that would have been addressed in the report. Predominantly the cost of living. But if you look at that report, it does not, it lacks sensitivity towards its people. So I will not agree with the report because there are some few things that they were added, especially when it comes to, if you look at, we go down to something like a tax.
Yep.
Tax has not been yet exempted in the report. So Kenyans are still suffering. That is what I would say.
Okay, so just to create or give us a background of what was agreed on, The team managed to agree on things to do with electoral justice and related matters. And here they agreed for an audit of the 2022 elections, restructuring of IEBC with an expanded selection panel, having 2 more members. I believe both political sides will now be able to pick somebody to represent them in the panel. They also agreed to extend election petition timelines from 14 days to 21 days and agreed to have the electoral laws passed less than 18 months to an election apply in the next election and not in the election immediately after such laws are passed. When it comes to the cost of living, they could not agree on VAT, reduction of VAT, and also the doing away of housing levy, which the courts nullified today, and we'll talk about later on in the course of this conversation. There were austerity measures, including reduction in terms of travels for state officers, and we also saw them agreeing on entrenching of funds into the constitution, including the national government Constituency Development Fund, that is NGCDF, and of course the Senate Oversight Authority, as well as the establishment of the Ward Development Fund by a statute. They also agreed on the establishment of the Office of the Official Opposition Leader with 2 deputies and the Office of the Prime Minister. They also agreed on fidelity to the law on multi-party democracy, where they now want a body formed to replace the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties. They believe that this body will now be impartial and won't be interfered with by other parties. When you look at what was agreed on Kimani Wachira, is this what you expected?
There were 5 issues that were in the final report, NADCO report, and 4 are readers-centered, and 1 seems to be Wanjiko-centered, and that seems to be Wanjiko-centered is not even agreeable, and it has to be discussed by the president and the former prime minister. So that report is just a representation of the views of readers. We saw that various people went to take their opinion, which have not been included in that report. So when I look at that report and I see that it talks about constitutional about fidelity, about entrenchment of offices, about funds, it all rotates about the 1% of readers. What about 99% of Wanjiko who are still languishing in poverty, who were promised by this government that they are going to, and they were called hustlers then, that they are going to benefit from funds and whatever. What they thought that will be in the report is not. So to answer your question, this is not what we expected. Mm-hmm. Secondly, there are things that were patent and would have been included, and they have not been catered for by the current constitution, mm-hmm. and we thought that will be addressed. To speak about, and we are in 16 days of activism against GBV, mm-hmm. we thought that report will have a remedy to that gender rule. If I remind our viewers, there was a court ruling during the former regime about that gender rule, when they said that the parliament may be disbursed, and I quote, because we don't meet the threshold. Numbers don't lie. If we were to have that entrenched in that report, it would have costed each Kenyan 58 shillings to have affirmative actions, affirmative offices introduced, to have to that gender rule included. And we also know that it, as per the report, mm-hmm. it cost 14,000 shillings, mm-hmm. or 14,000 shillings goes to waste, mm-hmm. as corruption, or money that goes to corruption. Mm-hmm. If it's 58 shillings per year to have to that gender rule implemented, and 14,000 per se goes to corruption, mm-hmm. it would have been easier to include that to that gender rule issue, mm-hmm. in this report, so that we can see it is Wajiko-centered and constitution-centered.
Mm-hmm. Kimani, for example, I want us to get to understand having women in elective politics. I'm not saying appointive positions. I'm talking about elective positions, and you'll help me here as well. When we legislate and we have this in law, will this encourage women to go and vie? Because I understand, in my understanding, elective positions require one person or an individual to present him or herself to the electorate and tell them, I have something I'm willing to offer to you, and if you think it makes sense, kindly elect me to do for you. Do you think legislating will help us get more women, let's say, to parliament if women actually don't get out there to vie for these positions? I think more men are presenting themselves for elections as compared to women, but I can be corrected on that.
The society itself is patriarchal in sort of way. It's like a man's ruling. And women do have some quite disadvantages, especially in politics. Look at the last situation with Kawira Mwangaza. These are some of the fears that put women not even to go for those leadership positions. Let's also talk of gender inequality. I will give you as myself as an example. I ran for MCA. I was running against a person who has more. I'm not going to put the issue of gender. I want you to see the capability of a woman beyond just being a woman. This is an incumbent who's been in office for 5 years. This is a person twice my age. We are talking about the experience that this person has, and also not forgetting the financial muscle that this person has. I, on the other end, is a community mobilizer who's championing for sexual reproductive health rights, governance, health, and I'm being put up against this person. I'll ask you the same. Do you think I'll have a fair trial on that? Mm-hmm. That is kind of things that hinder women from vying. All we are asking for is when it comes to women getting this elective or appointed positions to be given the same treatment or equality as to men, in terms of when the Office of Political Parties is issuing funds, women can be issued the same as men. And from that, women will start coming out. And there, women will start speaking their own issues. I'll give you another example. Gladys Rioba was kicked out of Parliament for something that just happened out of her being a woman. If these things are discussed on the open table, where we can advocate for things like free sanitary towels, this thing will encourage more women into leadership positions. Mm-hmm. So yes, it's all equality we are asking for.
Okay, and you're saying you didn't see that in the National Dialogue Committee report. Let me look at the role of the president. The president has got so many things to address. Right now, he has to work on the economy. One other thing that he has to work on is also the unity of the country, and he is actually the unifying figure. I think that's a role that even the Constitution gives him. Don't you think that through the National Dialogue Committee, the president was trying to bring Kenyans together? And in Kenya, apparently, it so happens that the unity of the country depends on the unity of the political big figures.
Maybe if you look at it that way, that the discussion was supposed to be a national discussion, and it has already achieved people talking. And when people talk, peace, there is peaceful coexistence. Yes, we have achieved one of the things that is not in the report, but the report itself is going to divide more than it's going to unite. For instance, some of these proposed amendments will require us to go for a referendum. Mm-hmm. And we know that referendum, even if we don't look at the economical repercussion, it is going to divide the people into two. Those who are voting, those who are for and against. Mm-hmm. So even if the dialogue was supposed to unite, it is going to leave another divided half or 50+1 and the 49%. So it is not going to achieve that. Secondly, if you look at it in this way, that this report was supposed to address economical issues. I remember, and I quote Rigi G saying that we are going to talk, we are not going to have more mandamanos on roads, so the economy is going to grow. Mm-hmm. We are going back to contestation, and we know that Kenya, when we are politicking, the economy goes to a standstill. Mm-hmm. So yes, we have already achieved unity. We have the other day we saw Babo Wino meeting with Ndindi Nyoro in their office. We have unity and cohesion. But if we go to referendum, which some of these things, some of these proposals will have to take us to referendum, because Article 255 of the Constitution articulates about the things that if you change the basic structure, you have to go to referendum. And if we go to referendum, we are going to live a divided Wanjiko more than they are today. Maybe also we must also include the costs. Who is going to fund this referendum? I heard somebody say, and my good friend called Eric Mwasia say that probably that's the reason why they are selling KCC and other buildings so that they can fund this referendum.
So let's look at, by the way, for clarity, Rigiji is Rigathi Gachagua, the deputy president.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh. So let's talk about the reactions to this. When you saw how the opposition reacted to it versus how the government side reacted to it, President William Ruto says, I welcome the recommendations. I've implemented some of them. I'm going to implement even those that require the executive to act on, and I'll tell my MPs to do what they have to do on the remaining ones. On the other side, Ndindi Nyoro, a close ally of the president, is saying this is a waste of time. Some people say if Ndindi Nyoro speaks, he probably is speaking for the president. When you look at the Raila Odinga side, Raila Odinga at first said, I've not read the report, but I urge patience and all that, indicating that perhaps he's in on it. And then Martha Karua comes and says, this is a road deal for Kenyans, so we cannot accept this. The same is said by Eugene Wamalwa. Raila Odinga again says there is a possibility of us going back to protests and all that. Do you think this mixed communication from both the government side and the opposition side, does it ring any bells to you?
If you look at our political structure, what I'm seeing, these elites are keeping Kenyans busy with the hula-baloos here and there on the report. If you look clearly, nothing will be implemented. So the cost of living will still be on the rise, despite the report saying, I saw the report saying that they will reduce fuel by 8 shillings and also reduce the cut of the expenditure by the MCAs and the MPs. If you look at that, that is what we should implement right now. That does not even need to go to a whole process of referendum. That is something that the executive will meet with the SRC and say, Kenyans, because the taxes are quite high, we can reduce the salaries of our legislatures. Then we can put this money elsewhere. Or rather, the executive will be like, let us look at our food security. Then we can work from there. Those are the issues we should be addressing. But if you look at just the report, it talks about just the political class. What do we want? You said that there will be a creation of office of opposition. Imagine a government funding an office of opposition. No. It doesn't work like that. Let the opposition be the people. That's why our constitution states, we the people, it is us who get to decide. And once Kenyans realize that they are more in numbers than those sitting at the parliament or at the Senate, it is them who put them to work for the Kenyans, not the other way around. It should not be a certain honorable sitting down and deciding, we are going to put down this report and this should be our recommendations. No, it should be Kenyans saying, the cost of unga is high. How can we work on our food security? We do have the rains, right? We do have the fertilizers. What are we doing with our lands? Those are the kind of questions that Kenyans should be asking themselves. Those are the kind of things we should be resolving. But talking about this whole report, I don't even see the need of it. Look at the situation of reviewing the last election. It's like putting salt on a wound that's not yet healed, because the kind of things you're going to find out there, it will be imbalancing in both political parties. Like
what are the things you're going to find out there?
There are so many things we'll find out there. We want that report to be opened. Because I witnessed some irregularities during the election as I was monitoring. So you're saying that we will go back and start scrubbing the same wound. Talking of IEBC, adding the number from 7 to 9. This is a whole commission that is supposed to be independent, and I don't know what really.
It's the selection committee, not the commission.
The selection panel yes. From 7 to 9. That is another expenditure, because we are adding more civil servants in our government, and this are taxpayers' money that is paying them.
Actually, if you look at the whole thing, we are having austerity measures, cutting down on spending in terms of travels of state officers, and then
we are removing from A and taking them from to B.
Yeah.
And that is what the government has been. This government has been keen in doing, trying to, and I quote David D, vomiting to Wanjiku's shoe. Because now, how is it possible? Yes, we are saying that we want to cut the traveling cost by 50% and also the allowances, and then we add two IBC selection officers. We also add opposition leader and 2 deputies. We have not been told how these 2 deputies are going to be selected. These 2 deputies and the opposition leader is going to have to be working in government vehicles. And we all know they are German machines. They are gatherers. And we are only taking from A and removing from A, taking them to B. And it's also keen to note that Wanjiku will not feel that impact of this report. It is going to be another burden, because if you are going to referendum for certain issues and there is no other economical impact apart from the resources that are going to be wasted in referendum, then we are doing nothing.
Okay. And then looking at your last response, Grace, you were speaking, you could not understand why a government would fund the activities of the opposition. I think that is happening in parliamentary democracies. But what we are seeing from the recommendations from this team is, it is like we are forming a hybrid system where we are not sure if it is presidential, we are not sure if it is parliamentary. I mean, how you have a prime minister, then you have the opposition leader, then you have the minority side in the National Assembly. It is kind of confusing, honestly speaking. But do you think that maybe the debate has been, if we are presidential system, let's be presidential system. If we are parliamentary system, let's be parliamentary system. And when you look at all that, and then you look vis-a-vis our situation, some people are saying, let's have our own original formula. We don't have to conform to presidential or parliamentary system borrowed from UK or US. But anyway, we get to look at that when we come back from this short break. But Kimani, I want you to close for us with that. Which system of government should we go with? And then Grace, I'll give you a brief or a few seconds to talk about the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, and then we call it a night here on the State of the Nation. So let's start with you, Kimani.
Thank you very much. Those who enshrined this constitution, and we went to referendum in 2010, they had a vision for this constitution. They brought the system that is there. If we want to change that, the basic structure, we have to go and think about what else is going to be impacted. For instance, when you introduce or you say that we need to entrench CDF in the proposal, that means that you are changing the roles of MP from legislature to maybe becoming a retro governor. So we need to think about what we are suggesting, and that's why I'm suggesting that we retain with the current system we have. It is redundant for you to build a fence for a house when the goods are already stolen.
Okay. 16 days of activism against gender-based violence.
Oh yes, we are having 16 days of activism, which starts from November 25th to December 10th. And this year's theme is we are investing to prevent violence against women and girls, especially on the gender-based violence and FGM and online bullying. We are taking this chance to educate, create awareness to the people in the community on the repercussion or the impacts of GBV and how it affects our family, not only physically but also mentally. So anyone out there, it will be a pleasurable moment if they can join us on it's all over the world, and they can see what's going on.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. That's it for the State of the Nation tonight. Joining me on the table was Grace Kamau, who is the Sub-County Coordinator, National Government Affirmative Action Fund in Nairobi. That was, you said, Roysambu. And then we had also Kimani Wachira, who is the Kiambu Youth Council Chairman. Thank you so much. That has been State of the Nation.